So thank you all for being here this afternoon for the campus presentation, if you will, of goal number 2 of our university strategic plan. I'm Jessica Harris. I'm interim assistant provost, and I was also chair of the goal number 2 committee. And you will see a nice list of other committee members in a second. But there are a couple of goal number 2 committee members here if you want to introduce yourselves.
Sure. My name is Amanda Russell. I am the internship coordinator for the school business.
And I'm Rex Jackson, Associate Director for Residential Life.
Okay. Again, thank you for being here. And I'm just going to kind of walk through, provide a little context as to how we've arrived at where we are now, talk through some of the changes we made to the goal and objectives, give you some indicator of next steps, and then take any questions or feedback from the crowd. So without further ado, let's get going here. So just a little context. I think it's really important that you all know that the goals for the strategic plan and the objectives are really the result of conversations that have been occurring on campus for years. So it's not, you know, the small group of people got together and just dictated what the vision would be for the university moving forward. But what you're going to find is that the strategic plan is just an integration of a number of thoughts and ideas that have been vetted throughout our community for some time. And I really want to draw your attention to New Reality and University Congress as 2 examples of that. So in September 2013, I don't know how many of you were here during the New Reality meetings and whatnot, but that was a process that was shepherded by then interim provost Ann Boyle, who initiated these conversations with faculty and staff really about the future of SIUE, the priorities that the university should set, particularly as higher ed was changing and continues to change. How is it that the university would meet the challenges of higher ed, and really who was SIUE going to be in 2013 and beyond? And I have here on the screen some of the various topics that were part of those New Reality meetings and conversations, expanding enrollment, retention, graduation rates, competency-based and prior learning assessments, retooling our processes, so thinking about efficiency and effectiveness in terms of our university structure, experiential learning, international programming, support for international students, e-learning, and of course, innovation in our pedagogy. And very clearly, these were a part of the conversations in 2013. In 2019, we're still talking about some of these various topics. There were teams put together as a part of the New Reality project that dealt with these various topics, and there are reports. And so I don't know if you've had a chance to see them, but they are located on the Provost website if you're interested. Also, during the 2015-2016 school year, so a couple years after New Reality, under then interim Chancellor Steve Hansen, he initiated the University Congress, which was quite different in terms of the amount of time and energy involved in this particular strategic planning process. But this was like 2, I believe, half-day convenings of representatives from various constituency groups on campus. So I believe the presidents of the various senates were a part of this, some deans were a part of this conversation. And those 2 half-day convenings dealt with these 5 questions. Questions that were really important for the university at the moment as we were dealing with budget realignment and the lack of funding from the state. But beyond that, in terms of, beyond thinking about the immediacy of the situation, again, this grappling with who we are, what our priorities are, and where we want to go in the future. And there are some reports from this particular convening as well, but again, it dealt with some of those same topics. Where is SIUE in terms of its enrollment? What does enrollment mean? Where should we be going in terms of our enrollment? How do you prioritize what academic programs to develop? Also here, revenue replacement with the loss of state appropriation, budget model, should we be thinking about something different? And then how can we revise our curriculum for more efficiency and of course to improve quality? So in some ways, still some alignment there with the New Reality planning process, but certainly some new key questions that were being engaged under the University Congress. So I think it's important, again, to note that you have this New Reality project in 2013, this 2015, 2016, and then you have in 2013 and beyond there, our previous strategic plan. So all of these ideas and thoughts that were vetted by a number of folks in our community have influenced a lot of what you're going to see in this presentation and those thereafter. So just to kind of give you some idea of where we are now, we did have a strategic plan that was put into place in 2013, and our University Quality Council has over the years apprised us of our progress since then. But of course now it's time to move into another strategic planning period. This new strategic plan is going to take us from this year through 2025, so it covers 6 years. And just some idea of kind of where we've sort of started this process. Back in January, the Chancellor charged those of us who were chairs of these various goal committees to really think about, within the context of these previous conversations, in terms of vetting by the Chancellor's Council, Extended Chancellor's Council, the Faculty Senate, Staff Senate, where was SIUE headed over these next 6 years? What was our identity? What are some big questions that we should be thinking about and considering as a university as we continue to deal with, budget issues and the changing landscape of higher education? And essentially, who do we want to be? And each of us were given a goal. There are 6 goals. And as a chair of the committees, we were charged with meeting with our committees and talking through if we thought the goal was accurate, if it needed to change, be revised in some way, and also to look at the various objectives that were associated with that particular goal. And for my committee, we spent about 5 different meetings over the course of about January to May answering those questions. And so you know that there were about 120 people across the campus representing faculty and staff across various units who were engaged in these conversations via their participation on one of the 6 goal committees. Just a little bit about goal number 2, which is the goal committee that I chaired. I think it's important to highlight the vast number of people who were on this particular committee and to thank them publicly for their contributions and work. Of course, you've met a couple of the folks here, but these are some of the other members who should be showing up on Thursday if they're able to, just to hear what you all have to say. As I mentioned, we met 5 times beginning in January. We had our last meeting on May 1st, and so what you're about to get is a result of those 5 convenings that happened this past spring. So right here you have the original goal statement that we were presented with. Goal number 2, optimize high-quality curricular offerings and co-curricular opportunities to meet the needs of the region, engage students, and increase student persistence and graduation rates. And so what we decided to do with that goal was to break it down a little bit and to be much more specific about what we meant by curricular offerings. When we say curricular offerings, that can mean a number of things, and we wanted to make it clear that we weren't just talking about the undergraduate learning experience, but we also wanted to focus on the graduate learning experience. So when we say curricular offerings, we wanted to make the point that it was undergraduate and graduate academic offerings. And then to think about what we're preparing our students to become and for. The key thing for us was to think about our mission and what our mission was. And if we're preparing students to go out and shape a changing world, how can we reflect that in goal number 2 as it relates to the academic experience that students would have in the classroom? So we said optimizing high quality undergraduate and graduate academic offerings to prepare students to become leaders who contribute to a dynamic and diverse global community. So not that we're not concerned about student persistence and graduation rates, but that's something that will be captured in one of the objectives. But we wanted our goal to really tie back directly to our mission and to make the case that we're talking about high quality undergraduate and graduate program offerings. Anything, Rex, Amanda, you want to add? Okay.
That's it.
All right, so our objectives. So the very first objective talked about the development and enhancement of curricular program offerings to respond to student interest and regional and national needs. We didn't make too many changes there, but again wanted to point out academic program offerings because you can certainly have programs, offerings outside of the curriculum that would also respond to student needs and regional and national needs. But we wanted to break down student interests into personal and professional goals. Because it's one thing to say interest, like what do you mean by interest? Is it, oh, I like this, so we're gonna offer it? Or is it about having a really deep conversation, or at least trying to get at a deep level, what our student goals are? Like meaning, like why are they here? Why do they want to pursue what they want to pursue? What life do they see for themselves once they get these degrees, and how can we respond to that in the classroom in ways that would be engaging and meaningful for our students on both a personal and professional level. And we, of course, kept the regional and national needs there, but we also thought about the global workforce, because this is a global economy. And all of our students, some of them may be working here in the United States, some of them may be working internationally, we don't know. But we want to show that we're preparing students to engage in the workforce, in this global economy, whether that be here or elsewhere. So to kind of expand our thoughts about what our academic programming is preparing our students to do. So we try to reflect that as best as we can in objective number 1. Okay, so objective number 2, we spent a lot of time on this one, and I actually will share with you specifically some of the notes from that particular meeting. But this one is about high impact learning opportunities in the curriculum. We took out through co-curricular programs, and I'm glad that Miriam is here, who is chair of goal number 3, because we spent a lot of time in our meeting. First of all, we recognized the alignment between goal number 2 and goal number 3. Because that goal number 3 also talked about high impact learning experiences, but primarily outside of the classroom. But if you take them as a whole, all of them are important for student learning experience and their time here at SIUE. So first of all, how do you bridge the gap? But for the purpose of our goal, we wanted to hone in on developing those learning experiences in the classroom. So we understand that what happens inside and outside are important and should be working together, but we wanted to make a distinction between what our goal was doing and what goal number 3 was doing. So we took co-curricular out and just focused on in the curriculum, like what happens in the classroom that will give students these high impact experiential learning opportunities. Now, we didn't say high impact practices, but essentially that's what we were referring to. But to make it a little broader, we just said experiential learning activities. And we said in support of our goals of inclusive excellence and integrated completion. Because inclusive excellence is basically where you tie in your quality efforts with diversity. So I don't know if you all recall, in the original goal, let's see here, let me go back a little bit. Let's get it. So in this original goal, it talked about engaging students and increasing student persistence and graduation rates. So we thought much of that was captured here in this objective, so we just decided to make sure it stayed there. We need to have it in the goal as well, because the point of all of this is to support student retention and degree completion. We thought inclusive excellence was important to keep because as we think about these high impact learning opportunities that happen in the classroom, certainly we want to make sure that equity is a part of our thinking in terms of the design, who has access, who does not have access, what are some of the challenges associated with students' participation. And obviously with goal 3, if you're thinking about those opportunities outside the classroom, inclusive excellence is also a part of that thinking as well. So we thought we'd keep that there. And if you give students these opportunities, they're engaged, they're learning, and certainly we hope that it supports degree completion. Objective number 3, increase student retention and timely graduation rates regardless of background. We didn't feel we needed to say regardless of background. I mean, that should just be our objective, to make sure that all of our students get through successfully. But a part of that is engagement, engaging academic opportunities. And so what does that really mean? And there are a number of ways to get at that. I want to go back really quickly because I think sort of tied to objective number 3 is some of the conversation we had around objective number 2. So one of the things we talked about is one, where are these high impact practices already in the curriculum? And so we really already have two built into our curriculum. We have this new FST 101 course that still needs some work. We're definitely going to work on it after this semester. This is our pilot semester. But the idea was to design that course as a high impact practice. And so that was the thinking, and to be intentional about it. And so what does that mean? That means, contact with faculty members, contact with peers, really intentionally design activities and assignments that students understand. And just to be transparent here, there were some assignments in the FST course that, as faculty and staff who developed them, like, oh, our students, they're gonna get this. And they're telling us, no, not exactly. So we're gonna have to work on that, but that's a part of making sure that this is an engaging class for our students and that they get it, and they get it in terms of understanding how it prepares them for the rest of their journey here. We also have another high impact practice built into our curriculum, our senior assignment, which is our capstone. That is an opportunity for students to apply the knowledge that they've gained inside and outside of the classroom to their major degree program via final project, research assignment of some sort. So we have those two built in. I do think we need to spend more time, making sure they're high impact, but I think we have a start. If we want to talk about students having access in the curriculum, those are at least two opportunities. But the key is, what does that look like in between? The junior year, the sophomore year. One of the things that we're talking about with the IS course, there have been some changes to IS, but one of the things we want to do, at least we're talking about, is integrating a group project as a part of those courses, one in which students have a chance to problem solve, to take a real world problem that they can approach from the two disciplines or multiple disciplines that are part of those courses, to show that there are multiple ways to solve a problem. Whether you're a historian or an economist, there are ways that you can work collaboratively to solve real world problems. And so that's something that we're looking to add into the IS course. So there are at least 3 high impact practices that we can build directly into the curriculum. But there are other ways to do that as well. But the reason why this is so important in terms of supporting persistence and graduation rates is that we know research shows that these high impact practices are shown to yield really high benefits to students who are from historically underserved populations. So all of that goes into mind as we're thinking about some of these objectives. And so, we didn't say it explicitly, but certainly it's implied, and it's implied based on our use of inclusive excellence in objective number 2. Let's see, some other things that I think are really important to point out in terms of our conversation is, and goes back to the point I made about aligning goals number 2 and 3. If a part of what we want to do is to enhance and increase these learning experiences for students, we have to make sure we have a way to track student participation, that we're clear about what the learning outcomes are, and that's very evident and public facing, that students are aware of these experiences and know what they mean and how they relate to their overall education here at SIUE. So there's just so much here that we can do. We know we have a great internship program. We know we have service learning opportunities. We have undergraduate research opportunities. So we know generally where they're located, but how do you bring it all together to support the goal and the various objectives here for goal number 2. So goal number 4, objective number 4, was to achieve average first-time test scores above national averages annually on professional licensure exams. Well, we crossed that out because we thought that it worked better as a measure of progress to support objective number 5. So we completely crossed that one out. And I'm really glad to say I did have a chance to look at some of the KPIs that are being considered for goal number 2, and that's actually one of the KPIs. So I was like, yep, our thinking about that was on point. And so objective number 5, accreditation, national recognition, we pretty much kept that the same, but instead of just national recognition, we said global recognition for the quality of our academic programs. You gotta think big, and so that was our thinking there. So, just to kind of tell you kind of where things are now, So we revised and updated our goals and objectives. All the goal committees did that. We submitted them. Really the updates as we were making them throughout the spring semester, those were submitted to the Chancellor's office. But over the course of the summer, the various goals and objectives were, vetted for feedback by the Chancellor, the Chancellor's Council, and the Extended Chancellor's Council. Based on that feedback and feedback from this rollout session here, if our committee should make or needs to make additional revisions, we will make those revisions and we will send those updates to the Chancellor's office. And our associate provost is actually working with the University Quality Council now to determine KPIs for each goal. And just to give you an idea of what some of those might be, graduation rate, because of course we need some baseline data to start with, but graduation rate, overall by ethnic background, and I will say that something that will be really important for us as we talk about data throughout the strategic planning process, and certainly as we begin to track progress, is disaggregation. Because it's one thing to say our retention rates for year 1, year 2 is 75+%, but it's important to break that down by student population because that could be an indicator of where some of our time and energy and resources should go. So retention rate, professional exam pass rates, job placement, academic ratings, and then of course athletic GPA data or data around GPA for certain student groups. And so these are some of the KPIs that are being discussed right now. And some of this actually, I'm really glad to say, came from some of the discussions from our committee. And so some of the things that we talked about that I just want to raise right now, we talked about, for instance, for objective number 1, let's see here, increasing the number of online courses, because we really started to talk about the needs of specific student populations, and we spent a lot of time talking about attracting post-traditional students to campus. And so what could we do in terms of our academic program offerings or our curriculum to do that? So online courses, degree programs, increasing the number of evening classes, the number of hybrid courses being offered, increasing weekend course offerings. We talked about more 8-week courses. So we had some really robust conversations. Creating trimesters, I know that's a whole nother can of worms, but we're having fun with it. But I think these are some really important questions to think about. Also, I think it's important in terms of these high impact practices. In addition to some of the things I've already talked about, tracking and learning outcomes and all of that, we also thought about student employment being framed as a high impact practice. Is there funding available to support faculty who are interested in developing HIPs to integrate into their courses? So those are some important considerations, as we think about moving on these things, because at some point the strategic plan becomes a real thing that we have to implement. And so what does that look like in terms of the availability of resources? I said this a little bit around objective number 3, but when you think about student success initiatives, making sure that those target the needs of specific populations. And so one of the things that Inclusive Excellence does is it gets us to consider, the role that individual students' identities play in their experience here and making sure that we speak to those needs. That's a part of retaining them and ensuring their success. And so those were some of the things that we talked about in our meeting. And so, as I said, we crossed out objective 4 and then kept objective 5 and thought that objective 4 could just be a measurement of 5. But those were essentially our discussions, the result of our discussions. We only had 5 meetings, but I thought they were very productive, and they achieved the goal and the charge that we were asked to carry out. And frankly, I'm looking forward. There are folks who were on the goal number 2 committee who want to continue these conversations, particularly around aligning goal 2 and 3 and thinking about, high impact practices and tracking that and what that looks like. And so those folks will be a part of some magical group that we're going to put together soon. But it was just really great for me, and I'm sure the others can attest, to work on a committee of folks from across the campus, different units, combination of faculty and staff, and to talk about these big ideas that we know are going to be real for us. So it was a really rewarding experience, and I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity. But that's all I have for now. If there are questions or feedback, we would be glad to take that. And of course, anything you tell us, we will then share with the Chancellor's office.
I have just a couple of comments. First of all, I appreciate the fact that you looked back at New Reality and the Congress, having participated in both of those. It's nice to know that all that time and all that hard work was providing context for moving forward again. And then secondly, I appreciate the broadness of including the idea of global in as many things as possible, because that just encompasses everything I think we're really doing, and it certainly fits with the mission. So thanks for that.
Questions? Comments?
Should we expand it to intergalactic?
We can do that too. Yes.
Yeah, I liked on your KPIs about looking at graduation rates by identity. In addition to ethnic, obviously, we can go gender, international, by school, all those kind of things. But you can learn some things that way.
I got a couple of questions. I'm just curious, and I don't have any agenda with this question, I promise you. Tying academic experience to workforce and meeting workforce needs. I'm just curious, did the concept of it's about liberal arts and it's about thinking and it's not about jobs, was there any discomfort with that? Because it seems to me in the last 10 or 15 years, higher ed has gotten a little more comfortable with the idea that people might actually get jobs, and that's okay for us to talk about that. Was there any kind of, that's not our responsibility, let's not go there?
No, I don't think so. Look, I didn't pick up on any discomfort with that. I think it's practical and it's real. And if you talk to, I'm gonna speak for myself, like talking to some of our students, they're like, this is great that we're reading all these books, but like, how is this gonna translate into my getting a job at the end of it? So I don't think that having the conversation about how our academic programs and the learning outcomes that we've set for our students, like having that conversation to me does not take away from the kind of value of a liberal education in terms of how the education we offer, how it informs the type of citizen you are, thinker you are, person you are. It all ties together. But I do think that, and this goes back to the thinking behind the FST course. Last week we spent time talking about our general education program. It was really clear that our students don't understand why they have to take general education courses. And it's like, well, okay, we could tell them, just talk about it, but talk about it in terms of skills and competencies and how gen ed is a foundation for their, major program. So when they, get into the chemistry degree program or international studies, like this is, general education laying the foundation for skills and competencies that are going to be reinforced through your discipline and through your degree program, and how all of that translates into job opportunities that employers just said that they're looking for students with certain types of skills. So being able to say, like, at SIUE, we have these objectives for the baccalaureate and our degree programs, and our curriculum has been developed in a way to give you these skills, and these are skills that employers say that they want, and so by the time you finish your degree, you'll have these options. I think being much more transparent about that, I think is awesome. It would bode well for us. But en route to doing that, you can also talk about, yes, it's preparing you for the workforce, but education also does these things, and let's talk about them. So I think all of that is a part of this. But I'm so glad that it didn't necessarily have that pushback, because that's what students want to know, their families want to know. I'm sure many of us were thinking about that too when we were getting history degrees. I know my parents were like, what are you going to do? Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a real question.
The other thing I wanted to ask was, if you imagine that experiential learning is a bimodal distribution of we don't do any experience and it's all experience, then you could say, okay, we have 40% of the classes that are experiential learning, or everybody gets 10 before they leave or something. Is there any part of experiential learning that feels gray to you as we get to KPIs? Just how do we really talk about that to internally or externally about, yeah, this is, I mean, this class was rated an 8 on an experiential scale, or?
I do think we need to like define what we mean by experiential learning. I think, well, I'm again speaking for myself. Usually when I hear the term here, it refers to a high impact practice. And so if that's the case, then what are the high impact practices that we offer? And AAC&U has that list of 10 or 11, and there are a good number of those that we already do here. So we have, learning communities, of course, our undergraduate research, particularly in terms of IRCA, but students are doing research in their classes. We have study abroad, and the same dialogue we consider a high impact practice and supported diversity learning. We have service learning through, successful communities collaborative, but also through student affairs. So I think if we want to say that when we say experiential learning, we're talking specifically about these activities, and have our list of 6 or 8 or whatever, and define what those things are. And then on the curricular side, it'd be interesting to tag courses that have those experiences built in so that students can recognize and say, if I take, biology 340, I'm going to have this undergraduate research experience built in, and being clear about what makes that particular research experience high impact. Because you could have variation and students can have these experiences and get something different. But I do think it's worth really, creating some shared language, like this is what we consider to fall in this category. This is how we define those experiences here at SIUE. So whether you have them in the classroom or outside of the classroom, the expectations are the same in terms of the learning outcomes and what students are supposed to get. And so that students can start to connect the dots themselves. So if they, take, my History 130 class, for instance, and I say that, diversity learning is a part of this class, they're able to make that connection, but also make the connection, oh, I had a diversity learning experience in that class, but also when I did sustained dialogue, it reinforced that. Or when I did that leadership program, it reinforced that. So I don't think it'll be that difficult for us to do. It's just getting all the folks in the room who are doing all of this work and just saying, like, these are the parameters, these are the recommended definitions, this is what we mean, this is how we assess it, and speaking the same language. I know I made it sound very simple, but I really think it's about getting this all in the same room. Anything else? So this is supposed to be like 50 minutes or an hour. Is it okay?
Covered it well.
Okay. Well, thank you. I guess we're done.